Well, good morning and welcome to ED&A. We've got a busy day with 3 hearings, and then we'll be executing some bills after. All right, so we'll open the hearing on House Bill 250. Is Rep. Baruti here? He is here. Come on up. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Representative Ben Baruti. I represent Hillsborough 43, which is Manchester's Ward 6, 8, and 9. I put this bill in, and I thought it was going to be the easiest bill I put in 32 years, but here we are. It's gone the gamut here so far, and there's a lot more to it. I thought it was just going to be a very simple bill, going from 50 to 100% on a death benefit. It was way long overdue, I think. Death benefits were paid at 50%. Group 2 people don't receive Social Security, so I thought this was it. So give them a one-shot deal, and seemed like the right thing to do. Then it was amended, and the person who put the amendment on will speak behind me, but I thought it was simple, and here we are.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none,
Oh,
I'm going to let
thank
you
you.
off real easy.
Got me off easy.
All right, we've got a couple other reps. Rep. Dan McGuire. Dan came in with no position.
What's that?
Did you come in with no position? You have a question?
Well, yeah. There are reasons to, thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Dan McGuire. I represent the town of Epsom. Yeah, there are reasons to like and dislike the bill. So I'll talk about in general. So I'm the primary author of what you see in front of you because it came to my committee last. So what this bill does is, well, let's start with what's current. So currently in law, there is a benefit when an employee, and this is any employee, Group 1, Group 2, teachers, municipal employees, any employee who's part of the retirement system dies accidentally on the job, and that includes sort of non-accident. It includes police officers who are killed in the line of duty as well. Their beneficiary, so typically their widow, but it could be a widower, it could be children if they're not married, it could be parents. Their beneficiary gets a pension of 50% of their salary for the rest of their, well, in the case of children, it's only until they're 18, but in the case of a spouse, typically it's for the rest of their life. And that benefit has been part of our retirement system since it started. So we're talking about more than 50 years that benefit has existed. So this bill came to us, as Representative Baruti said, strictly for Group 2s, that's police and fire corrections officers, changing the benefit from 50% to 100%, okay? So we looked into the details, and the details are that there are currently 32, I'll just say the word widow, 32 widows receiving this benefit. 19 are widows of Group 2 members. 13 are widows of Group 1 members. So typically it would be maybe some DOT person working on a construction site and hit by a car or something like that, right? So, or killed in some other kind of an accident. So those 32 people are receiving roughly $1 million a year worth of benefits. So the average benefit is roughly $30,000 a year, okay? Fairly modest at the 50% rate. But we discovered that there is one widow who's receiving $125,000 a year. So somehow that particular year that the benefit was based on, their spouse was somehow getting a lot of overtime or whatever. And so that's the reason we made some changes to the bill. So first of all, we decided to add Group 1 because, like I said, for 50 years, both Group 2 and Group 1 have gotten the same sort of benefit. So we put that into the bill. We also put a cap of $85,000 on this benefit because it just seemed wrong to have some be way high and others, but the bulk are a very small benefit. So this money is untaxable, and so $85,000 of pension is like $100,000 of a taxable pension. So those are those two changes. We also made a technical change. I think it was probably an oversight, but you'll notice on line 9, we're changing what's earnable compensation to average final compensation. So in general, in the pension system, we always base pensions on an average. Typically, it's a 3-year or 5-year average of the highest earning years. But in particular, what had been in law was just a 1-year number. Whatever the last year, the year the person actually died, that would be the year that based the pension on, which seems wrong because, like I said, some could be way high, some could be way low. The average seems to be the right number for pension, so we changed that. It had always been that for Group 1, but for some reason Group 2 was different, and I think it's just an oversight in my opinion. The other thing that was changed on the House floor is what you see in 14 through 18. So the way the bill was originally, the cost of this benefit was on everybody. It was essentially on the unfunded liability, right? So it was on all employers. And so some people felt that it really should be the state paying this benefit. So that's what we did. We changed it so that the general fund would pay this benefit. This isn't a large amount of money, right? So it's like I said, $1 million a year. It's not much. And that would only be for new beneficiaries, not for the existing 32. Those would not change. And the other thing is we would sort of assume over time so that the number of incidents would go down because safety equipment and safety procedures get better over time. So, this is a very occasional sort of thing, right? There's maybe one incident every couple of years, something like that. So anyways, and that's basically it. So now the downside. So if you talk to people who, this is an insurance type of benefit, right? It's a benefit that the widow gets based on how the person dies, right? The circumstances of the death. So if you talk to people who sell life insurance, this is not a benefit that they recommend people have, because really a family needs insurance regardless of how someone dies, right? If someone's in a car accident driving to work, you need insurance for that, right? If someone dies, gets a heart attack, you need insurance for that. Well, this doesn't cover it. This is very specific circumstances. And so if you have insurance for general death, right, for death of any kind, you can't buy insurance that excludes this, right? So then you have a weird sort of a thing where in this particular circumstance, you have a huge pension, but in the standard circumstance, you have whatever you have for insurance. So really what we should do is look at the totality of benefits to employees and make it correct for all cases, sort of, not just, that's why that's the only caveat on this bill. It's not a lot of money. We've had it for a long time, but, it's not really, there's no big picture here, sort of like there should be, in my opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So I'm trying to make sure I'm understanding this. Is this an annual payment or a one-time payment?
This is an annual
It's an annual
pension.
payment, okay.
Okay, which had been at 50% level. So at the 50% level of the spouse who died, their income, right? This bill changes it to 100%
Okay.
with a cap and the other things I talked
And it's
about.
going to be drawn from general fund money with the part in section 4?
Yes.
So it's not going to impact the.
It doesn't impact towns in any way, right? In effect, it helps towns a little bit because they would have paid for future cases, right? So,
Well, our fiscal note isn't correct. We've got it as the original introduced bill, and that's what was confusing.
I see what you
me a
mean.
little bit.
Yeah,
Okay. Other questions? Senator General.
So with the accidental death, it's strictly on the job, correct? If it were.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
right. It's not on the weekend. You're in a motorcycle race and nothing like that, right? It's on the job, but it includes, like I said, law enforcement being killed on the job, not just accidents in that sense.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, thank you.
Senator Perkins Cook.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, I know you mentioned in your remarks that there had been a discrepancy between Group 1 and Group 2, but our Group 2 members are not eligible for Social Security benefits, right? So I think that traditionally, we've sort of seen their pensions a little higher.
Absolutely.
Because of that, okay.
Yes,
so that
but-
might be something we want to address.
Yeah, you'll see from Mr. Carlin of the retirement system, he gave you a very nice handout. There are, if you look at the second page of that,
Yep.
there are significant benefits that Group 2 members get that Group 1 members do not, right? That are separate from Social Security. The Social Security benefit, as I understand it, is very minor. There is a survivor's benefit, but it's a very small number. So.
Okay, and then just one
Further
more,
question?
Chair, if I
Yep.
may. Yeah, so as the chair mentioned, we have the fiscal notice introduced. It's only showing 1.3 million coming out of general funds. Has that traditionally been the amount?
The reason, thank you for the question. So the reason the fiscal note mentions general funds is because some employees are employed by the state and some are employed by municipalities.
Yeah.
So that general fund number is the state's portion of
Okay.
this,
Okay.
right? But this bill, as now it's written, everything would be general fund.
Right.
You see what I
Okay,
mean?
thought that's what you mentioned.
Yeah.
Further questions? Senator Carson.
Senator Altshuler had her hand up first. No, please.
Senator Altshuler.
Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. Can we dial back to something you just said a few moments ago about, I think, if I heard you correctly, that you were suggesting that that people that are receiving or for whom this would be a benefit, either in either version or as things stand right now, in your opinion, they should be availing themselves of the private life insurance market to subsidize their benefits package? Could you
Yeah, I
clarify
understand.
your
Yeah.
statement? Thanks.
So my point is, anybody who wants to could buy this kind of benefit for themselves, right? You could buy a benefit for yourself that you have extra, you're only paid if you are in a car crash, for example. That's how you die. Whereas if you die from a heart attack, you wouldn't be paid, right? You could buy an accidental death benefit or a plane crash or something like that. But it's not something, it's not the kind of benefit that is generally recommended for people because your family has needs regardless of how you die, right? You know, if you die in a plane crash, if you die from a heart attack, if a stroke, your family has the same needs, right? So a benefit like this, it's a feel good to some extent, right? It's something like our employee died in this horrible situation. We want to compensate, right? So, but if you think about it from the point of view of the person receiving the benefit, they have needs for any kind of death, not just this one, this rare case. You see what I mean? And so it's hard for them to cover themselves for everything but this. You know what I mean? When you give benefits, you try to think of the whole package in some way, rather than this circumstance, that circumstance. And I don't know, am I being clearer or not really?
Paula?
Yeah, not exactly.
Okay.
So I think what I'm looking for is the clarification or the justification here, because the benefits that we have for the accidental benefits for the group 2 are not feel good. They're because the people who do these jobs are taking an extraordinary risk with their lives for the protection of us, and their families are also taking an extraordinary risk. And part of their compensation package for taking that extraordinary risk is that in the event something goes terribly, terribly wrong, their families will at least be financially compensated for the loss of their loved one who died in the line of duty. So it's not, I don't understand the comparable to somebody buying a life insurance policy. And I will clarify that for instance, for executives who do a lot of traveling to hotspots around the world, it is standard practice and standard policy for those companies to insure their employees with double indemnity benefits, sometimes triple. So that is something that the company takes on, even acknowledging that their employees are taking extraordinary risk to travel into certain zones around the country. Right. So the extraordinary risk of just living and possibly being in a plane crash or possibly being in a car crash is very, very different than the extraordinary risk that we are asking our Group 2 beneficiaries to take on.
I understand.
Okay,
so,
thank you.
So let me respond. So if you look at the back page of what you got from the retirement system, there are 2 specific benefits for Group 2 employees that are lump sum benefits, large lump sum benefits, $100,000 from the state and more than that from the federal government, okay, for these circumstances. So if you're saying that this is to compensate for the pain and suffering of having someone die prematurely on the job, right? Just the agony of that, right? There are lump sum benefits for that. But if we're talking about this, the bill is about a pension, right? It's about ongoing expenses for your spouse in the event of your death. And so a pension is supposed to replace income, right? And so you need that kind of pension, you need that kind of life insurance, regardless of the method of death, right? So what you're talking about, compensation for the agony of the circumstance, there are these big lump sum payments for that, okay? That's separate from this bill. So.
Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, Representative. Oh, sorry. Good morning, Representative. If you may, Mr. Chair, I have 2 questions. One of them, and again, Mr. Carlin does a great job with these for us. It says the New Hampshire retirement system has assumed the bill is prospective. And I'm wondering, I know that there's some language in here, if you would object to that language being made stronger, because I think we need to say this is not retroactive, this is only going forward. It's only going to affect those people going forward. So that would be, would you?
Yeah, that's our intention, and I do believe it's clear, because in general, when the pension system determines a pension, right, for somebody, there's somebody retires or somebody dies, and they set up a pension. That's never changed unless there's some kind of COLA or something like that later on. But so anytime we change law regarding pensions, it's for going forward. It's never for the past, if you see what I mean. And there is this line in here, accidental death occurring after the effective date of the paragraph. I mean, if you think that this is somehow unclear, that's fine with me. So, yeah.
One of my other questions is, do you think that there should be a definition section in here saying what constitutes an accidental death?
I think that's elsewhere in law.
Okay, and
Yeah.
I'm just thinking that for clarity's sake, if someone was to look it up, they would have, okay, this is what constitutes a death benefit, an accidental death benefit. This is what qualifies you to apply for this benefit.
Right. Well, I think it's elsewhere in law because it also applies to that $100,000 lump sum, for example. So I think both sections kind of refer to that definition.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about the average citizen who has now lost their loved one in an accidental death, and they're trying to figure this out, that they can go and they can read it themselves. Everything is in
Yeah.
one place,
Yeah.
as opposed to now having to look in multiple places.
Sure. Yeah. I tend to think the retirement system provides informational brochures and things for employees, so people don't tend to, go to the RSAs to figure things out. They go to the retirement system, and so. But it's up to you. That's the
Mr. Carlin can further expand on that when he testifies. He is on the list. Senator Carson.
One last question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. One of the questions I had was, is this going to affect any other benefit that they're receiving? I know that, and this might be a question for Mr. Carlin, but I think you've already answered that, and by talking about here all the other things that they're going to be eligible for. So this is something new and distinct from what they already received. And I'm concerned that these other funds, they're going to say, oh, well, they're already getting X amount of money from the state. Should we lower the amount of money? And I don't want to see that happen.
I see. Yeah, that's not our intention, and this doesn't. As far as I know, there are no side issues other than the one I mentioned about pensions. But this doesn't affect the $100,000 payment. This doesn't affect anything else. It's a self-contained thing. And again, this has been long time standing policy of the state since 50 plus years, right? So.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for taking my question. How does this affect union negotiations? We just went through one in a town that's in my district, and I was not even aware of this. So we were doing the union negotiations with the fire department, DOT, but this never came up as a benefit. I'm not even sure how to ask, but.
Yeah, I guess I really don't know the answer to that. In general, because this is a benefit provided by law, a town could somehow negotiate, I guess, with a union to have an extra benefit or something like that, but they can't force into our law some change of terms or anything like that. So I think it's not really relevant. That would be my, just my opinion.
All right, thank you, Representative. We
All right.
appreciate you testifying.
Sorry I took so long.
Representative Carol McGuire.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Senators. I'm Carol McGuire, representing Merrimack District 27, Allenstown, Dunbarton, Epsom, and Hooksett, and I'm also the chair of House ED&A, which saw this bill earlier. We were not unanimous in support of this bill, and I was one of those opposed. One of the issues was resolved when the House floor amendment funded it from the general fund rather than adding it to our unfunded liability. But as far as I was concerned, we never saw a good reason why a 50-year-old benefit that has been in place for 50 years, and there are additional benefits, would need to be changed. There was no reason given why we should change that, particularly why we should change it now by doubling it. And so that's something that, for your consideration. The benefit, this is a rare event, fortunately, but we were not convinced that it should be doubled. And that was the other reason we were opposed. We didn't feel that we actually had the justification for it. And I'd like to comment with your question about the definition. This amends RSA 100:8, which is all about accidental death, and it defines accidental death in the sections that are not part of the bill. So it's there. And we heard when we were dealing with the $100,000 state lump sum benefit a couple of years ago, that the workers' comp commit process is used to determine if an accidental death is actually job-related. So it's not determined by the retirement system. It's an independent process, which helps. And in terms of employees, the employer normally would provide something like life insurance, which is useful, and that's what you would negotiate. This is a separate one only for death. It doesn't apply to disability or anything else.
Thank you. I guess I have one question as I'm reading this. It's causing me a little concern of putting a specific dollar value in the bill. I mean, you have a bill that language that has been on the books for 50 years and working because it was a sliding scale as wages increased. And when we cap this at $85,000, while I realize today that may be a good number, 5 years from now it may not be. Are we setting ourselves up for the potential of having to revisit this on a regular basis?
You might be. The reason that the benefit has not been adjusted for inflation in the past is that the salaries are adjusted.
Exactly.
You know, but that came in finance, and we didn't look into it. So I would say yes, it's a question.
Okay.
And again, that's very rare. If there's 30 odd people receiving the benefit, and one of them is over 100,000, you might want to take the risk and just leave that number off.
I understand it works today. My thought was 5 years from now or 10 years from now. That was kind of what I was
I'm not,
thinking.
as I said, that came in finance, and I didn't
Sure.
work on it.
Okay.
We were concerned primarily about the funding, which issue has been solved, and the question of why are we increasing this perfectly reasonable benefit, which has worked for 50 years, and doubling it all of a sudden?
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you.
All
Appreciate
right.
you coming in. Marty Carlin. Good morning. I know you've probably
morning.
got some answers to some of the questions we've already asked.
I will try very hard. Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the record, Marty Carlin, representing the New Hampshire Retirement System. We don't have a position on the bill, as written. This is a policy decision for the legislature to make. I did sign up to answer questions, and if I may, I'm going to start with a sort of an overview of death benefits for the retirement system to kind of zero down into this one. There are two types of death benefits available to active members. A8 is accidental or job-related death, and 100A9 is non-job-related death, which is referred to as ordinary death. So this is a disease, cancer or a car accident on vacation, things like that. For the ordinary non-job-related deaths, which this bill does nothing to modify, a member needs to have at least 10 years of service for a permanent lifetime benefit to be paid to a beneficiary. The accidental death, there is no minimum service requirement. If somebody were killed on the job, early in their career, there would be a benefit paid to a surviving spouse. And that's another thing I want to specify with these pension benefits. The statute is specific to for the lifetime benefit to a surviving spouse. If there's no spouse and the deceased person has children under 18, It would go there, and if they have parents who they are reporting as dependent on that deceased member, the parents would get a benefit. So that's the language, from the 60s and before. If you left a beneficiary as a sibling, or if you were in a relationship with someone you were not legally married to, they wouldn't get a lifetime benefit. They would get a refund of the member's accumulated contributions plus the equivalent of their last year of salary as a lump sum payment. And even if you are a spouse or one of the people who qualified for the lifetime benefit, they have the option of taking the lump sum as well, depending on what other coverages they have and things like that. It may make sense for different people to do different things. So those, spouses and others eligible for the pension benefit can take the lump sum up front if they prefer. This bill does two things, as the sponsor spoke to. It increases the percentage of the benefit, and also for Group 2, changes the benefit to 100% of average final compensation versus 50% of the annual rate of earnable compensation. So that's basically the person's salary in the 12 months prior to the death, and including any payouts to the survivor of accrued leave time, things like that, that would count in that last 12 months. Then it's half of that. So it's hard to say, I think, whether 100% of AFC or 50% of last 12 months, it may be different for different situations, which is a larger amount. But I'll point out, because this question came up in House Finance, is that language about pegging the Group 2's benefit to annual rate of earnable compensation was in the original enabling statute for NHRS in '67, and was in the prior police and fire plans, back in the 50s and 60s. So for whatever reason, lost to the winds, this is one of the sections of our statute where there's always been a slight distinction between Group 1 and Group 2 benefits. In a lot of cases, like, average final compensation, things like that, it's been consistent, for both groups. This one has always been different. That's not a statement of whether it should or shouldn't be, but just sort of background on that. In response to Senator Carson's questions about the note, assuming the bill is prospective, we were referring specifically to the 32 people receiving a benefit now, that the benefit wouldn't be doubled if this were to pass. This is only for future duty-related deaths. You do have an old fiscal note attached to that. We got the request from LBA for this amended version last week, and waiting back on the actuary to perform a fiscal analysis. I think it's fair to say, because the state will be picking up the future cost, this is going to reduce employer contribution rates by some figure, probably a little bit more for Group 2 than Group 1, because the percentage of duty deaths in Group 1 is lower, overall. So we'll get that back, get a worksheet over to LBA, and they'll update the fiscal note on that. So that's basically where we're at. We don't see any administrative issues with applying this were it to pass. So I'd be glad to answer any questions at this point.
Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Were you consulted on coming up with the $85,000 lump sum? Do you know where that came from?
It was Division 1 Finance.
Yeah.
Representative McGuire's vice chair of that. He may know specifically, but it was just in the amendment.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Brian Hawkins. Morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, Brian Hawkins, representing NEA New Hampshire. Good to be back at EDNA. I don't have a whole lot to add. I think most of the information has been covered. I do want to say we appreciate the addition of the Group 1 in by the House. We think that that is important. Fortunately, we haven't had to have a recent usage for this, but sadly, in today's realities, it is definitely something on the mind of a lot of school employees in that with some of the threats that have been lodged against schools just in the last couple of weeks. So again, we appreciate the addition of that. As far as, I think, to your question earlier, right now the 85, I don't think there would be any. Well, at least none that we represent that would fall above that. You are starting to see some salaries increase where you could see that be an issue in future years. So I think for perspective, the average salary is not the median, but the average salary for a teacher right now in New Hampshire is around $61,000 a year. So.
Thank you. Questions? Seeing none? Oh, Senator Carson?
Thank you.
I'll almost let you go.
Almost, I had I wasn't fast enough. Good morning, Mr. Hawkins.
Good morning.
One of the things that I'm increasingly become concerned about are the fact that teachers are being attacked in schools. And unfortunately, it's only a matter of time before something happens. And I hope sincerely that we never see anything like that here in New Hampshire. But I do think it is a reality, and I think it is something that we should start to prepare for. So do you think that this is adequate for Group 1, for teachers? Is capping this at $85,000 adequate to meet the needs of these teachers? Because we're trying to recruit young teachers to come and work, and they're going to be looking at a benefit structure. And if anything should ever, God forbid, happen to them in the classroom that causes their death, is this enough to take care of them?
Thank you for the question, and I certainly appreciate your recognition of that and the dangers that we're facing. I think that you are seeing some salaries. I mean, if you put in a number of years on a school district, certain school districts, you could be starting to exceed that, and so we certainly would be in favor of not having that cap or to raising that cap, because obviously this is a tremendous not only the tragedy itself were it to occur, but as you said, we have a tremendous shortage of educators in this state, and not just the folks, I should say, I know this is a retirement system bill, but not just the folks who are receiving a pension in schools, but also, school employees who don't receive a pension in schools. That certainly also is an issue. And I know this isn't the only bill that the legislature is looking at to help support that. Certainly, we've been working on a recruitment of educators legislation, and also the legislation that the Senate has already endorsed with respect to some of the decennial commission's recommendations on the Group 1 pensions. So I hope I answered your question.
You did. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wasn't going to speak, but listening to the testimony, for the record, my name is James Demers, and I represent the New Hampshire Police Association and the New Hampshire Troopers Association. And I think this discussion about the cap is relevant because from a law enforcement standpoint, new recruits are looking at every single benefit the state offers. These are tools that can be used to help get people into these professions. And we have a serious recruitment problem right now, as you all know, in law enforcement at the state level and at the local level. The New Hampshire Troopers have about a 20% vacancy rate, and it is extremely difficult to attract young new recruits who want to go into law enforcement. If you keep in mind that this also applies to corrections officials, you have, I'm sure, seen the news that they have a 51% vacancy rate. We have the National Guard at our state prison filling in for some of the duties at our prison. So these are the kind of benefits that a person will look at if they're going to take a job in New Hampshire. And if you think that if you have a relatively young police officer who is putting in a lot of overtime, doing details to get as much income as possible, a young person who may have a family, they could be making well above the $85,000 that this is capped at. And if they lose their life in the line of duty, that family could find a tremendous hardship when all of a sudden a $100,000 salary goes down to $85,000. So I think if you are contemplating removing the cap, it may make sense from a recruitment standpoint. But also, to your point, Senator Pearl, when we put caps in, we have to constantly monitor those caps and have to reopen the law to adjust them. And since I think this would probably impact so few people, it may make sense to leave the cap out of the bill and just deal with the first part of the sentence.
Thank you. Actually, since you're here, what about the change from annual rate of earnable compensation to average final compensation? My thought is you may have a trooper who is perhaps taken on a new role as, on a SWAT team or something now, which may greatly increase their salary. It also greatly increases their risk. They may have been just on an average detail or road patrol or something prior to that, so they may be seeing a significant bump in their salary in that year that they're also seeing the significant risk. Is it reasonable to change this to average final compensation, or is the old language more reflective of the risk that they're assuming?
Well, I actually like the original bill, which was 100% of the earnable compensation. But I think this is probably close to a wash, that for some it may be more money, for others it may be less. But the original bill actually did not change Group 2 to final compensation. It was 100% of earnable compensation. And I don't recall anybody expressing concerns about that approach.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, thanks for testifying.
Thank you.
Anybody else that would like to testify on House Bill 250 before I close the hearing? Seeing none, we'll close the hearing. Next, we'll open up the hearing on House Bill 330, and Representative McGuire is here to introduce. Thank you.
Good morning again, Mr. Chair, members of senators. I'm Carol McGuire, Merrimack 27, and House Bill 330 started as a request of GELCAR to exempt the National Guard from some rulemaking requirements, which they strongly supported. But while I was writing it, they also asked me to include the recruitment incentive information. So from my point of view, what it does is it allows them to edit, to use an incentive of $1,000 rather than $500 maximum. This is Section 2. And that, up to the total amount of funding we give them for the incentive program. And the funding is collected from court fines to the most part, and paid to the state treasurer, collected in the enlistment incentive fund, and that makes sense. The rulemaking stuff, I can answer any questions. We decided that the department had so few rules and that they were not generally public rules. They didn't affect the general public, they only affected the Guard for the most part. So we decided to eliminate the formal rulemaking and simply require them to have internal rules. And we thought that $1,000 might be a more reasonable incentive if they wish to give it, but that's up to them to decide who they want to give an incentive to and how much within these limits. And I'll try to answer questions, but there's people who know a lot more than I do behind me.
Thank you very much, Representative. Are there any questions for Representative McGuire? Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for taking my question. When it looks like from what you just said, and that the program would be funded by fines collected that are paid out to the military court, and the fiscal note, I don't see where it says how much they get annually. Like what is an anticipation of fines for the year? Like, is that an average that comes in? Or?
Actually, that's what we have allocated in previous years. That's what's
Right.
in the budget for them. And I shouldn't speak because I'm not certain, but I believe that the fines go into the fund, and then a certain amount, which is from the fund plus general funds if necessary, is allocated to the department for recruiting, and they can spend up to their budget.
Okay, follow up.
Yes, follow up.
So if there are not fines enough to fill the $1,000 incentive, there'll be general funds to bolster that.
I believe that's the case, but
Okay.
please don't quote me on it.
No
I have people that understand the system a lot better than I do.
Okay, are there any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much, Representative. The chair will call Warren Perry.
Please, the chair will have Lieutenant Colonel Brooks Hayward.
Okay, just for our record keeping, just introduce yourself before you speak. So that way, our secretary will be able to attribute comments appropriately. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. For the record, my name is Warren Perry. I'm the Deputy Adjutant General for New Hampshire's Department of Military Affairs and Veteran Services.
I'm Lieutenant Colonel Brooks Hayward, the commander of the Recruiting and Retention Battalion for the New Hampshire Army National Guard.
But before I start my testimony, I'll answer Senator Altschiller's, did I get that right? Altschiller's question. So there is an appropriation in the operating budget for $50,000, and then will be supplemented by the fines collected through the piece. The average amount of fines collected over the last 15 years is less than $2,000. So, yes, ma'am. So I'd like to start by saying this bill does three things. One, it increases the amount of the enlistment incentive that's paid to members, current members of the National Guard and former members of the National Guard from $500 to $1,000. This is to help incentivize referrals for recruits into the National Guard. As you heard in earlier testimony on a different bill, recruiting is a challenge, not just for state police and corrections officers, but also for the military as a whole. And this will go a long way to ensuring that those that are currently serving are helping us to get the next generation of the next greatest generation. The second thing that it does is it deletes two rulemaking requirements that were written into specific parts of our statute. So one is about the Education Assistance Program, and the other one is for this particular enlistment incentive program. And the rationale is that because these two programs don't apply to the general public as defined in 541A, they only apply to current and former members of the National Guard. Rulemaking is not required. So when these programs were developed, it was thought that, hey, you should have an admin rule associated with this, but it's really not required. And it really is it's an arduous task to get rules made. it's arduous. And in this particular, I'm being polite as I possibly can. And because I believe in OLS and I believe in the requirement for admin rules, but in this particular case, we can probably handle this inside by ourselves. So it deletes those two rulemaking requirements. And it's just, we don't have attorneys on our staff. And, we don't have a huge staff in our department. So it just would be much better for us. And they're not required. So, and the third thing it does is it makes the funds collected from the fines, it gives us a place to put them, and then it makes them continually appropriated, so we don't have to go back to the budget and rework them. So once we collect these fines, we have them at our disposal, essentially in perpetuity. And again, it's not a lot of money. When I went back and ran the numbers based on our testimony in the House, it was $15,000 over 15 years. It's not a lot of money that we collect in fines there. So subject to your questions, that concludes my testimony.
Thank you. Did you want to testify too? You're just here for questions?
Yes.
I'll just say rules are easier than legislation, than changing statutes.
No, sir, they are not.
Questions from the committee? Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, not so much a question as a comment. My concern, thank you, Representative McGuire, was I am always worried when a program is self-funding based on finding problems with the current members. So I'm glad to hear that the bulk of the funding would come from the general funds, and this is just a place for the fines to go so as not to set up an incentive structure to look for places to fine people.
So if I could comment, Mr. Chair, I'll ask me a comment. So military justice is a justice system with due process, right? So we it's not something that we take lightly. So I do understand your concern. A similar concern was raised in the House that we would incentivize, speeding tickets. It's the old rule about, quotas for speeding tickets, and we got to go find them because we got to make the budget. I assure you in this case, military discipline is about discipline, not about quotas and not about doing those things. So I want to assure you that we would never turn the military discipline system into that. They're entitled to due process just like they are in the court system, and we would never do that. So these fines are all subject to, to rule. So I want to, acknowledge your concern and say, we're not doing that.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you for coming. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Kevin Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, ladies of the committee. For the record, my name is Kevin Grady. I am a 25-year Air Force veteran, and I'm a 24-year resident of the town of Hooksett, New Hampshire. Today I'm here representing the State Veterans Advisory Committee, and we are chartered by State RSA 115:A-8 to sort of speak for the veteran community. And one of the things that we do every year is we take a look at the bills that are coming forward the Senate and the House, and ones that have veteran impact we take a position on, and then I come and I tell you what that position is. We do unanimously support this bill. The increase in the incentive amount is relatively small in the big picture. And this is kind of a two-pronged attack. You probably have already seen Senate Bill 45, which came through in this session, which could potentially transfer educational benefits for our members after their first enlistment to a spouse. That's part of the retention piece of what we're trying to do here, but the recruiting piece is also very, very important. And I'm sure that the squadron commander back there of the recruiting squadron would tell you that his folks do a superb job of actually putting people in the Guard once that decision is made. But finding those people, really and truly, our Guard members are the best recruiters that we have. Word of mouth with friends and acquaintances about the Guard experience and the Guard opportunities are kind of how we work that through. And again, to Senator Altshuler's point, I was a squadron commander when I was in the Air Force, and that non-judicial punishment, which is where those fines would come from, okay, that there is a due process. We do take that very seriously, because the alternative for that member is I'm sorry, but no, I don't accept that, and you can court-martial me if you think it'll actually stand up in a court. So it was kind of my mantra as a squadron commander that I would never do something like this unless I was prepared to go defend that in court. So hopefully that takes away any thoughts, and Colonel Perry addressed it well in the House. It did kind of come up, well, you know, are we going to be out there increasing the number of people that get fined so we can support this program? We are absolutely not going to do that. So we do unanimously support this bill. I'll leave you with my final pitch, which is if you are thinking about putting a bill together that's going to have veteran impact, we are a resource that you can use to make sure that the language and everything that is exactly what you wanted to say, and without any unintended consequences that we have to come back and fix later. So subject to your questions, sir, that's all I have.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Well, we appreciate your testimony, and thank you for your service as well. Senator Lang signed in support. Is there anyone else that would like to speak on this bill? Seeing none, I'm going to close the hearing on HB 330. Senator General, it does not look like we have anybody to introduce this next bill, which you've sort of been our go-to person. Representative McGuire, are you prepared to introduce the next bill? We have no one here. Okay, Senator General, you're relieved. All right, we'll open the hearing on House Bill 519, and Representative McGuire will be recognized to introduce it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Carol McGuire, Merrimack 27, and I'm also the chair of House eDNA, which heard and approved House Bill 519 and sent it to you. To clarify, this creates a new position, a new title, but the person involved is already working for the commissioner. It just puts the title into and the responsibilities into statute and make sure the duties are clear. The fiscal note was actually that has no impact because the people are already there. If we decide to change their pay grade or whatever, that's a separate action. This just changes the title of the existing people.
Thank you. So I guess make sure I understand, this person is already employed and we're just changing their title. Okay.
I think it's a deputy director or whatever, something like that.
Okay.
But it's there is a commissioner, deputy commissioner, and they carved out a security officer, which makes a lot of sense. There's also a privacy officer created in House Bill 2, which also makes sense, because those are both issues that DOIT needs to be very aware of.
All right. Questions from the committee? Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking my question. If this person is already a deputy, why?
It's to clarify the responsibilities and make sure that that's what this person is responsible for. They may have been doing it already or to some degree, but this says this is what we want you to do. And we looked at what these requirements are, and the committee agreed that that's what the security officer ought to be doing. And to have a specific point, a specific person who is dealing with security on all of the systems in the state that DOIT deals with is very important. I forget how many cyber attacks they get on an average day, but it's more than one.
So if we're reassigning the duties of a current employee, will that leave a gap of what that employee was doing? Was there any discussion on that?
According to the commissioner, who I'm surprised isn't here, this person was doing a lot of this work already. We're just clarifying exactly what that position needs to do. And he says that having the title might also help with recruitment, which is always a always a problem in IT. We
Unfortunately,
don't
you're
pay
the only
nearly as
person,
much.
you're the only person signed up to speak, so you're getting all of the questions that I would have asked the commissioner.
That's fine, well, I will next time I see him, I'll let him know that he should have been here to answer your questions. 'Cause
Senator Altshuler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your graciousness in taking these questions. Perhaps this came up in the House hearing that I don't have your report here. On line 26, chairing the Cybersecurity Advisory Committee. Forgive me for not knowing we had a Cybersecurity Advisory Committee. Who's on that? And,
I'm afraid I don't really know.
oh, okay.
It's separately defined in statute, and it's just not, there's no change to it by this bill.
Further questions? Seeing none? Thank you, Representative.
All
We
right, thank you.
appreciate it. Senator Tim Lang signed in favor. Anybody else who would like to speak on House Bill 519? Seeing none, I'm going to close the hearing. So Senator Carson is introducing a bill, and I have to introduce one at 10:30. So we're going to play a little cat and mouse game here doing exec session. I'm hopeful she'll be back soon.
I could use a few minutes to confirm.
I was going to say, I think if we're going to take like a 10 or at least a 10-minute recess, and we'll see if Senator Carson's able to return, and we'll do what we can then. I have a bill to introduce at 10:30. Anybody else have any responsibilities?
11:30 is the school group coming in.
Okay, we should be done by then.
I just may meet them out there.
All right. Either of you have any other obligations?
She's done with her bill now. Is she coming?
Yes, she knows we're going to exact.
No, I know. Is she
I'm
going
good
out
till
again?
12.
I don't have anything till 1, so.
Okay. So let's take about a 10-minute recess right now, and we'll see if Senator Carson can get back from her introduction, and maybe we can do a little bit before I have to go.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
It's a little chilly out
All right, who
there.
shut the
We're
window?
doing, but it's nice. We got through the last one too.
All right.
Tucker,
We
did you shut that window?
Didn't think- Are you cold?
No, it was wider open.
Well, I had to close it a little bit. It was blowing the papers all off the desk. I had half of Sharon's stuff over here.
Here's what I'm hearing, and this is what I'm feeling.
So,
Yeah.
all right. We have the full committee back, so I will accept a motion to go into exec session.
So moved?
Second?
Moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we have several bills that I'm hopeful we can get through exec session today. That next one. I think we'll start at the end and work backwards.
Okay.
So,
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Yes.
just curious, was there anything today that you felt we could exec?
yes, I do.
Okay, good.
I believe there's two of them we could. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, but my thought was
Today's?
the last two we had today we could exec, but
Okay. I didn't know if you wanted to do those first.
would,
because they
would
were
you
fresh.
would you like to do those first?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yes.
All right, I'm fine with that. I don't have a problem with that. Let me just change my stacks of paper here.
Okay, not a problem.
All right, what did I do with my schedule? Down there. Nope, that's not the right one either. Okay, I seem to be missing today's agenda. There we are. I'll
There we
steal
go.
yours if
Yeah,
I may.
you can steal mine.
I don't know where mine went.
Probably flew, probably Senator Perkins Coker might have.
I
'Cause
stole
if
it.
Flew, because there's two
It's-
right there.
All right.
There's mine right there.
And if
There
anyone
you go.
sees my
So does
highlighter that took
Senator
a walk.
Perkins Coker as well.
All right, House Bill 519.
in
Do I
my
have a
pocket.
motion for that?
Nope, that's lip gloss.
I move on to pass, Mr. Chair.
Second?
Moved and seconded. Do we have discussion on House Bill 519? That was establishing the Chief Information Security Officer for the Department of DOIT.
I think it's a good idea for the state, and we heard that this position already exists, and so we're just formalizing it.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Mr. Chairman, I move consent. Motion of consent, second?
Second?
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
How about House Bill 330?
Mr. Chair? you want
Oh,
Sharon?
I'm sorry, Gary can take that, excuse me, Senator General can take that out. Thank
House
you.
Bill 330, I move on to pass.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Moved and seconded, discussion. That was relative to the National Guard Retirement Incentive Program and its funding and rulemaking. I guess I will say, I thought it was great to have the service members come in and testify, and it seems like a really good move, and they certainly need some help with incentives to recruit. I think this bill will greatly benefit them.
Mr. Chair, if I may, it's also, I think, we've had a series of bills where they're, I guess you could say, reinvigorating the recruitment process. And I see this bill as just a part of that modernization process to help them recruit and retain soldiers.
Further discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Seeing none, all in favor of ought to pass on House Bill 330?
Aye.
Any opposed?
I'll move consent, Mr. Chair.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded, all in favor of consent?
Aye.
You know what, I'll take this one out. Unless somebody else really has a burning desire to do it. Okay, I'm not ready to exec House Bill 250. I think we need to have a little work on the cap portion of it, as well as, I'm not 100% convinced that the language on the Group 2 retirement compensation, equation, the way they're figuring it. I'm not certain I love the new language. I want a little time to think about it, so I'd like to hold that one.
Okay.
All right. House Bill 655.
I move on to pass.
Do we have a second? Moved and seconded. So I know this is a large bill. It's fairly comprehensive. I think it's a good decision for us to move forward with the ought to pass. I do realize there may be a few minor tweaks we want to make, and I believe we have another vehicle that we can use to do that. And I just think this puts in place the gains that we have, and I know that from the conversations I've had with the corner office, it seems that they are favorable as well, and that this bill could go forward and be signed. And I think that that would be a good move for us, and any adjustments that we want to make, again, we can do in a different bill.
Okay.
Further discussion?
Yes, Chair, if I may. You know, I think I understand the motivation for moving this through. I do think there are some gains here. You know, I've put together an amendment, as you know, and I know you're considering that via a separate vehicle. I think my one concern with moving 655 ahead as it is would be, you know, on page 8, the section concerning RSA 310(9) on complaints and investigations. You know, I think when it comes to people's livelihoods, it's just really important that we have strong due process procedural pieces in place, and that's part of what my amendment is designed to do. So I'm very hopeful that both pieces will move through. In the interim, since I recognize there are probably the votes to move this bill today as it is, I do want to just state for the record that in drafting the amendment, I found that our current investigative rules are incorporated by another section of this amendment, which is on page 18, lines 13 through 17. And so just in the interim, for those tracking this bill, we have grandfathered some rules that are a strong support for this process in the interim. So I just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of that, and I understand we'll probably move this along today, but I'm hopeful you guys will work with me on the amendment language as well.
Well, thank you, Senator. I certainly know we had some concerns expressed to the committee in testimony, and I'm certainly not dismissing those in any way. And I think that we have the opportunity to address those in a different bill.
So you're not moving this amendment?
Well, I think because of my concerns, I'm probably going to vote against moving this today, but I understand what we're doing, and I'm hoping that we can work together on the amendment. I just want to make sure both pieces go together.
Further discussion? Representative McGuire, would
I'd like to say that House ED&A shares the senator's concerns, and we are in fact looking into the investigative process. And I expect we'll have different, we'll have some other bills coming forward from both the Senate bills we have, what we've retained, and other stuff going through. So yes, we need to work out some more details. The point is that we want to establish a minimum process for the OPLC to do investigations, and that's what 655 is. There are additional structures that we need, but I don't think Senator Pearl and I are in agreement that we don't want to let the rest of 655 wait while we work out the details on that. And as you say, all the rules from the current law are in place and will remain in place.
Thank you, Representative.
Thank you.
Again, I just want to reiterate that that commitment is there, because we do recognize there's some changes that need to be made to that. Further discussion?
Yeah,
Senator Altshuler.
we had some concerns about page 7, that, you know, there's details that we could, that I had hoped that we would incorporate in an amendment, and not just let this move forward as is, because it was an incredibly big lift, and a lot of stakeholders were involved in putting this together. So, you know, for instance, line 24, page 7, licenses shall be valid for 2 years. Well, that's a change from 3 years that has not been justified out with some of the stakeholders. We didn't address what the objective standards would be on page 4. I mean, there's just a lot of little details that I feel like we went through, and now we're leaving them behind with most importantly being the adjudication process. I'm really uncomfortable not incorporating the adjudication process.
Senator Carson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As someone who served on the subcommittee that dealt with this pretty much beginning in August for every week, this is a huge overhaul, and it really settles the question about what are the duties and responsibilities between OPLC and the various boards. Right now, it's kind of scattered, and it just really clarifies who's responsible for what. My concern is if we start to micromanage the process with the boards, we're going to be putting things in statute that over a period of time could change. And it's better to have that negotiation and that discussion happen between OPLC and the boards rather than putting it into statute. They're going to be working much closely with the boards now. And also, there's a reporting mechanism, because one of the things that the boards wanted was communication. We want better communication. We want to know that. So that is also in here. So I'm comfortable with what we're trying to do here, that they're going to work a lot closer than they have in the past. And when these issues come up, they're going to rectify them between them, that they don't have to keep coming here to get us to change something. They needed that flexibility. So I feel comfortable with that. And Senator, with your comments about the 2-year licensure, we started making changes to that, and we're trying to get everybody to 2 years. So that way there's consistency across the boards. Some boards it was every year, some boards it was every 3 years, and so a few years ago we really started with 2 years. And everybody seemed to be comfortable with that. It was really about the consistency of these things, because the boards would say one thing, the OPLC would send another, and guess what? The licensee is right there, right in the middle. What am I supposed to do? So, again, I feel comfortable with this. I do think, as with any big change, there might be tweaks that have to be done over time, but I think we should at least get the process started and adopt this and have it placed into law so they can start doing this. And again, if there are issues that come forward, we can deal with them. So.
Further discussion.
My 2 cents.
Yes. So I don't disagree with anything you said, and the admirable work done by a summer committee. Thank you all for doing that. We're just this close, and rather than letting something go that we know we could tweak right now, so we don't have to tweak it later, seems like the preferable thing to do. Particularly we had, the plumbers come and talk to us about how they have fees set by their professional organizations. And then, this could be a double fee for them. And it's not, we have an opportunity to just spell out some details. Rather than this, it doesn't mean that we can't move forward. It just means we know of some details now. There's probably going to be more that we find out later. But why move forward with a list of things we know we're going to have to clean up, rather than clean them up now and then wait for things that reveal themselves later? We just feel like we're this close. This close.
Further discussion.
And I'll just say for the record, I also appreciate all the work that's gone into this, and I did have an amendment today ready for this purpose. But I agree with many of the comments made on both sides today, and I think we'll work together to try to make sure these details get incorporated.
I'm certain we will, because I think we share a lot of the same concerns. Again, my feeling is we've got a pretty good piece of legislation. I want to take the gains we have and then the tweaks that we need to make, I think we can do in a different bill, and then we'll have that opportunity to have a little more time to discuss that. And plus, we know that this bill will go forward to the governor's desk. anytime we make changes, there's always a risk that we run into issues with the folks on the other side, that they don't agree and can really belabor the process. So I think I'm comfortable and agree with Senator Carson that we've got a pretty good structure going forward, and this kind of sets the base, the framework for moving forward. Further discussion? Excuse me. Everybody's good? All right. So the motion on the table is ought to pass. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
So the motion passes 3-2. Senator Carson, you have a lot of
I knew it.
background on this.
Yep.
Would you like to take this up?
Sure.
I mean,
That's fine.
I'm
That's fine.
willing to if you don't want
No,
to.
no, no.
All right.
We'll do it together.
All right, fair enough. Okay, the next one I want to, there we are. House Bill 594, which is the relative to the licensure and out-of-state applicants, basically reciprocity. I'll shorten that. We have a motion.
I'm sorry, wait,
594.
It's just
I'll
putting my
give you a
papers
second.
away?
Yep, no
Yeah.
worry. I'll give you a second.
Okay.
I knew what I
all
was
the
doing, so
wrong
I
papers
was
in front of me.
advance.
Okay, 594.
Yes.
Okay, so,
I will move, Mr. Chair, for purposes of discussion, I pass.
We have a motion
Second.
about to pass. And a second. Senator Perkins Walker, did you want to have a discussion?
I did have a comment. So I think that what we heard in the hearing were a few things. One was that, we wanted to make sure there was some way for our boards to, I guess, question or have a check on the director's determination if something was substantially similar. I think we heard maybe it was in hearing that really, these rules need to go through jail car, and so there's an extensive procedure in place to make sure that there's input on that determination. And then I also think one of the concerns we had was to make sure existing rules were grandfathered, which, as I said, in sort of my work on both 594 and 655 outside of committee, I've found that we do have that provision incorporated in existing 655. So I don't think an amendment to this ended up being necessary to address those issues raised at hearing.
Further discussion?
Yeah, are you talking about House Bill, the amendment 1271 being unnecessary? Because I thought that was a significant miss that we had to stick back
right.
in.
Yep.
So,
Which one?
This one.
which
Yes.
was,
Thank you.
Senator
yeah,
Brown.
the physicians and surgeons.
No, I was just speaking to the issues raised at hearing, but
Oh,
yes,
at the
you're
hearing,
right.
okay.
There is another amendment. Thank you.
Yes, so is this the appropriate time to introduce that amendment?
So would the committee be amenable to putting this in a different bill so that this bill does not get amended and does not have to go back to the House? I don't think there would be any issue in doing so.
Well, it's a, where would you,
We could put this in the other bill that we're thinking of using for a vehicle. We could put this amendment on that. And the reason being that this bill would then go forward. And I don't disagree with the amendment, but if we amend the bill, then it has to go through the process of going back through the House.
yeah,
And we're never guaranteed of how the outcome is going to be.
well, how did this come out of the House? Where's my,
It came out on consent, but we're
Oh,
changing
well.
the bill.
yeah, but we're changing the bit by adding in the physicians.
Mhm.
Yeah, which, I thought that was a pretty easy lift with,
Sure.
Being able to consult with doctors in Boston,
Mhm.
via
Senator Carson?
telemedicine.
I'm sorry.
Right,
Yeah.
and I think
My
we,
apologies.
if I remember correctly, testimony about, especially like down in our area where we're
Yes.
close to Massachusetts, that you could be seeing somebody in Massachusetts, they don't have a reciprocal license, and you've got to go to a parking lot in Massachusetts
Exactly.
to make a phone call so they can talk with you.
Right.
I mean, that's ridiculous. But I would like to make a suggestion to everyone, and I would ask you to speak to your aides. We have these reports that come from the House. This is the report of the committee. It tells you, what the consent calendar recommendation, but then it also prints out the blurb. And the blurb, I think, is very instrumental to try, if you're looking at the bill, because you asked Senator about the House, and that blurb, as you
Yeah.
know, will tell you
I've got it right here.
what
It was,
that is.
I
And
thought if
so
someone had
I'm
it off
just
the top
saying,
of their
these
head.
are very helpful for senators, and please speak to your aides to see if they can put these in your bills for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it helps answer questions.
Yes, I have that. I just thought off the top of your head if you knew, rather than my shuffling through. But I
Yeah.
do have all these reports. Sorry, I didn't know that stat off the top of my head. Nonetheless,
That one I happen to know. So.
yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So it's just,
Nonetheless, the issue of people having to cross over the border to
Right.
take those, to be able to consult with their physicians. Same thing on the seacoast. There are a lot of people who, I have had not an insignificant number of people who have physicians at Joslin Diabetes Center. And they would like to be able to just do it from home.
And I completely agree.
Yeah.
But my thoughts were
So
to
I-
move this bill through
Right.
without having an issue, any potential issues on the House side. We are going to have another bill that's going to have a lot of different amendments in it.
Well, it sounds like there was a conversation about another bill that's a vehicle for a lot of things that I was not privy to. So,
Yeah.
this is I would like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'd like to put this on this bill, but
Well, the bill is open for amendment.
yes. So, I'd like to move House, amendment, Amendment 1271 ought to pass.
Do we have a second?
Again,
Discussion. So we have discussions on the amendment, 1271. Again,
Well,
I'm not opposed to the amendment itself. I
Great.
understand. I would prefer it to be in a different place than on this bill.
where's that place?
It would be a different bill that we would use, one that we haven't pushed through the Senate yet, through our committee yet.
I hear what you're saying, but you're also speaking in riddles. So, what's the bill? Why can we
Well,
just be
we have
open?
two other bills that we have not pushed through that would be relevant, House Bill 532 or House Bill 409. They both work in the Office of Professional Licensure, so, within the OPLC, so they would be relevant amendments. Those two I'm holding, and we have not acted upon yet as a committee.
Well, I think if we have a bill that the House passed on consent, it won't really be that big of a lift to add in a very friendly amendment so that, as was testified by Senator Rosenwald, that people who, the wife of the gentleman whose wife has Alzheimer's with doctors in Boston. I mean, that kind of testimony, I don't think, I can see this going right back on consent with a concurrence.
It
I
potentially
just,
could.
I wonder, one of the bills you told me about was not consent. So why wouldn't we put it on the easiest one?
Because again, Senator Carson.
no. I was just gonna say Representative McGuire has her hand up.
Representative Mariah, would you like to come up? Since we're talking about the House, I think you could have some relevant comments. Yes.
The problem with this amendment is that it's the second one we've seen about making exemptions to the requirement for licensure for telemedicine. And I really hate the idea that the requirement for telemedicine license, which we just passed, I think it was last year or the year before, and now we're saying, well, but in this case, you don't need it. There was the bill on the corrections. There's this bill about people around on the border. I mean, we really ought to be looking at why the hell we've got that requirement, and instead of addressing the physician's licensure, which this amendment does, we should be addressing the telemedicine license requirement. I don't object to the concept of the amendment, but I think it's being put in the wrong place. It's being put into physician licensure rather than telemedicine requirements. And I think that that would be a much easier sell if you said, well, telemedicine license is required except if you have an established relationship with a doctor outside of the state. That would, or for the other cases, because we had a lot of discussion about that telemedicine license.
Sure.
And this was one of the issues that's brought up, but not as forcefully as by Senator Rosenwald. And therefore, we didn't include that exemption, but I think we probably should have. I just think this exemption is being put in the wrong place.
Thank you, Representative.
So I can't guarantee it would be on consent.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Aye.
Aye for the amendment. We're voting on the
I'm sorry.
amendment.
Let me back up. We're voting on the amendment.
Amendment,
Yes,
yes.
okay.
That's an
I'll
aye.
start again because I was not clear. My apologies. All those in favor of Amendment 1271?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so the amendment fails. Now we're back to the original bill. Again, I will say I'm not opposed to the concept of it. I want to make sure the bill gets through cleanly. And I would like to have a further discussion about the language that we want to amend in a different location. Okay? From my position. Further discussion on the ought to pass. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Do we have consent?
I'll move consent.
Second?
All in favor of consent?
Aye.
Who would like to take this one up? You know what, I'll take this one up. Let's see, Senator Carson, you were taking 655, right?
Yep.
Okay. Get that one. Well, I might as well keep going backwards. House Bill 461. I believe you have an amendment that I put forward. Okay, why do I not have that? Doctor, we may have to close that window if the outside entertainment continues to be a bother.
Yesterday.
Here you go, Senator Pearl, I have a copy. If that helps you.
Yeah, I don't know where mine is gone.
Sure.
Okay,
Really foul.
My
language.
apologies.
It was really loud, but very, very foul language. I'm like, holy cow.
Wow.
Yeah.
my apologies to the committee. I enjoy the air too. We'll try opening again in a minute. Okay, so I'm going to move ought to pass on House Bill 461.
Second?
And then I'd like to offer Amendment 1359. Do I have a second on the amendment?
I'm sorry, the amendment is what?
1359.
I will
Wrong
second
one.
your amendment, Chair.
All right.
I'm looking for my amendment.
It was forwarded to the committee yesterday. I'm
Yep.
not certain
I'm
why.
sure it's here somewhere.
Could we get copies of this? Because I don't seem to have it either, and I know I brought mine in.
I have 078.
I'll tell you what we'll do. How about if we withdraw on this bill for just a minute, and we'll get copies for everybody. We'll move to a different bill.
Is it Amendment 1350? Yeah.
I have, as a note, oh, sorry, I have as a note here, in municipal, on House Bill 30, that there was very similar language in House Bill 30.
Senator Perkins Polka had talked about House Bill 30, and I think we determined it wasn't the same
Okay.
language. correct?
That's right. So House
Wait.
Bill 30 concerns counties, and 461 was broader. It concerned municipalities. And so if you recall, Senator Carson, 461 also came with a penalty for municipalities. And so we ended up passing House Bill 30 because it was narrower. But, my concern remains that, especially in the case of municipalities, people moving from full-time to part-time are not always doing that for compensation reasons. They may be doing that purely because there's a position that can't be filled, or and so my concerns on 461 are that it would tie the hands of our cities and towns who are simply trying to fill open positions from folks that have retired.
No, who's bringing in the amendment?
I am.
Okay, did you get rid of and the like?
I got rid of the whole entire bill and made it a study committee.
Okay,
And so, because certainly the concerns that were brought in by Representative Pearson when he introduced the bill were very valid and certainly of concern. But the one thing we didn't hear was that there was any actual evidence of how much it was happening. And it certainly is concerning if it is happening. And I felt that rather than pass a bill that seemed to really penalize some of our municipalities when they didn't necessarily deserve to be penalized, I thought maybe the better thing to do was to create a study committee and look at the issue. And because I certainly am concerned about the allegation if it's actually occurring. And we didn't quite, we heard also from retirement, Marty Carlin, that he wasn't sure of the actual impact it was having on the retirement system or what it could have. So I thought that this would be a good position for the Senate to take, that we understand that the issue is certainly concerning and we'd like to look at it and study it. So that's what the amendment 1359 does.
Okay.
Further discussion on the amendment?
You know that the unwritten rule, right?
I do, that Senator General would love to be on this committee since it affects her district so much.
Absolutely.
Okay. That was kind of slick.
Oh,
Was it?
wow.
Subtle as a freight train.
Oh, my
There you
goodness.
go.
No good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah.
Thank you, Senator Gendro.
You're welcome.
Further discussion?
You're the best. It's all
right.
you.
All in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Okay.
And then so we'll be voting on House Bill 461 as amended with amendment number 1359. Already has been moved and seconded. Further discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Move consent, anybody?
Move consent.
Second?
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I can take this one out if you want, since I'm the one that.
Who moved and seconded consent?
I moved.
I
And Senator
seconded.
Perkins spoke aside, Lieutenant did. Okay.
And I'll take this one out.
Okay.
We already did 330. Sorry, I'm scrolling back through my notes.
What about 358, relative to the filing and adoption of proposed administrative rules?
We needed to hold that right now.
Okay.
I have a hold on that.
So we're gonna hold that one. Okay.
258, which is the relative to animal chiropractors. I'm going to move ITL on this bill.
I'll second that.
So the reason I'm moving ITL is I had subsequent conversations within folks within the industry that are using animal chiropractors currently, and they're really not having any issues. And in speaking with the Veterinaries Association, they're not seeing any issues. So I really can't identify that there's an actual issue that this is solving. So when that happens, I usually am not interested in moving a bill forward. I know we had testimony that we could have amended the bill to make it acceptable to the chiropractors, but I personally don't see the necessity of this bill at this point in time. So that's why I've moved ITL. Further discussion? Seeing none? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Senator Carson, you're not bringing
Yeah,
this forward?
no.
Okay. In that, there you go. All right.
All in favor of ITL?
Done.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Consent,
Second.
Mr. Chair?
All in favor of consent?
Aye.
All right, you want, I guess I can take this one out too if you want, unless somebody else wants to. Any volunteers? All right, looks like
Well,
it's
you
me.
have a farm. so-
Yeah.
You're our animal person.
I'm the animal guy.
Yeah, you're the animal guy.
It's all you.
All right, House Bill 238. I know you have an amendment for that, but we will move the bill first.
I move to pass on 238.
And I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Senator Gendro, you brought an amendment. Would you like to move that?
I do, we do have a couple committee amendment changes,
Okay.
and I will defer to Senator Perkins Coca
All right,
and
Senator
Senator
Perkins Coker.
Altschuler on this.
I think it, with all due respect, it may make sense to move Senator Gendro's amendment because our friendly committee amendments are to attach her amendment.
Okay,
Okay,
Senator Gendro, would you like to move your amendment?
I will move it.
Do we have a second?
Second?
Moved and seconded. Discussion. So Senator Perkins Coulter, would you like to discuss changes that you'd like to make to the
I'm
committee?
gonna eyelash my
Sure, and these are changes that Senator Altschiller and I have identified together, and we're hoping the committee is open to. So there's 3.
Okay.
The first would occur on page 2 of Senator Gendro's amendment, line 30. We'd like to change the word interpreting to clarifying. If the committee's okay with that. And then the second part of the proposal.
Are you all set? Okay, I'm sorry, I'm just making sure Philip's on. Okay, go ahead.
No problem. So the second part of what we would propose as the committee amendment is that from the version of 238 as amended by the House, so I have to refer back to the bill we had in front of us at hearing,
Okay.
we would appreciate incorporating on page 2, lines 32 through 35. And yeah, I'm just going slow so
Yep.
everybody
I'm
can
sorry, I'm
keep
having a
up.
little binder issue here.
Did I leave my copy like under your files?
So you're looking at page 2.
Of
What
the
were
original
those?
bill?
No.
As Senator, are you looking at the bill as amended by the House?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and I got the clarifying, and
So now I'm on page 2 of the version amended by the House.
Okay.
I'm on lines 32 through 35.
okay,
And so this language, if the committee recalls, this language has been removed by Senator Gendro's amendment. And so our request would be to put this part back in, which simply asks that the department confer with the council when preparing the RFPs. And we understand that, including the full language as originally drafted would procedurally feel complicated for DHHS, but we thought that it was reasonable to ask that they at least consulted with the council in terms of preparing those RFPs, because I think, I forget the exact wording, but it's nothing about us without us. I think the idea is that if we're going to provide the highest quality services we can to our residents with disabilities, it's important that they have some input. And so trying to balance DHHS's concerns with our council's concerns, I think maybe just inserting this language could strike that balance. So Senator Altschiller, I don't want to speak for you if you have anything to add.
Senator Altschiller, did you want to add?
Yeah, the crux of the testimony that we heard was that the council felt very excluded from the development of RFPs, and that occasionally when those came through, they were not targeted to the actual needs, and felt like if they had had an opportunity to just give some input, and they felt very unheard, that perhaps these RFPs, might have been written with a little bit differently, and they just over and over we heard, we want to be consulted, we want to be heard. So without putting in the language that demands, which was on page 3, lines 8 through 12,
Which
and
would be the
also
third part of the amendment.
yeah, like which Senator Gendro, smartly took out, because that was the part that we heard was very cumbersome, but to keep in a space where there's that open communication and that the council is heard on, here's our input on these kind of services when you're putting it out for RFP. That's all. So.
Senator Gendro, this is your amendment. Are you?
I'm great with that.
You're fine with it, Senator Carson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My concern is really twofold. Number one, you have to look at what were the original duties of this council. And I'm looking at Senator Gendro's amendment, and they already have input. And I'm looking at page 2, beginning on line 10. Let's see. The council shall regularly review information on the quality of developmental service and make recommendations for improving. And then it gives you all kinds of things that they're supposed to be doing. The problem that I have is the RFP process is a very controlled process. And Now you're going to be opening it up to a group of individuals and giving them the ability to influence that. And I have some real concerns about that. We have made incredible strides in our RFP process over the past few years. A few years back, Representative McGuire and I sat on a subcommittee, and we started working on this particular process because we heard so many complaints from people that were trying to access the RFP process. But you're now going to allow these folks to become involved in that process, and I do not believe that that is their role. They can get all this information, they can send it over, but when you come down to the actual process, there's no role for them to play. It is something that is very tightly controlled for a variety of very good reasons. So I just don't believe it's good practice to involve them, because what do we do with the next group that wants to be involved in the RFP process? And they want to swing it in one direction versus another, because they have statutes about how they're supposed to go through the process as well. And I just see the ability for conflict. I can see undue influence being made here, and we don't want that to happen. And again, I just point out through lines beginning, let me go back to the second page here. Nope, this is the amendment. But in the, that they already have the ability to participate. And they should use that ability that they have to try to work with the Department of Administrative Services. But they have very strict rules and regulations. And I just see this as being very troublesome. So I cannot support including those in the amendment. I completely support clarifying. I think that's important. But this is not the role of the council. This is not why this council was put together. It's unfortunate they don't feel heard, but they do have a way to be heard already. That's in here. So I just cannot see them interfering in the RFP process. It's not their role. And I don't think we should be giving them that role. Not at all.
So we certainly heard concern from HHS about what Senator Carson is discussing. I guess I'm not comfortable at this point without consulting and making sure that this wouldn't be a problem for them. I guess the thing that I'm looking at in the conversation that we had is we know HHS very loudly heard that there were issues and they need to address them. And I feel confident that that message was delivered. And I think the changes that we have in the original amendment, you know, I'm certainly fine with the clarifying portion. I guess I'm a little concerned with adding this too. It does seem a bit redundant. I think Senator Carson has covered that pretty well. I'm a little concerned about adding that piece.
Yeah, and I hear what you guys are saying, and I certainly don't want to tread on, don't want to tread on the department fulfilling its other duties. I also want to remember that, you know, like the purpose of what we're doing through that RFP process, right, is to provide services to humans, to our residents, you know, and so making sure that the heart and the spirit of that is captured, it seems important. And this language just says confer and receive input, you know, as DHHS shapes a proposal. That's really the time to figure out what is needed pursuant to that proposal, and you know, it just seems a really appropriate time to have input from the folks that are receiving the services. And I appreciate the point Senator Carson made. The council has this role to, you know, sort of provide feedback in other ways, but none of this language, you know, allows them to participate in the actual services that will affect their day-to-day lives. I mean, they are the ones depending on these. So I share that respectfully. If you guys are open to consulting with the department to see if they might consider that, then we'd appreciate that too, but I hear your points. Yep.
Are you,
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
let's talk. Great, thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Melissa Nemeth, and I am the legislative liaison for the Bureau of Developmental Services within HHS. And we share the concerns that Senator Carson has voiced this morning. Appreciate the perspective that Senator Perkins Quokka is bringing as well. But with respect to the conferring, even with them as far as writing in the RFP, it seems to be that sort of crosses the line of the parameters that are there to keep the RFP process in the way that it is currently. And I know our CFO was here before, Nathan White, as well, and some folks from our contracts and procurement office had shared those same concerns that if we started to go down that path with getting the input into the actual document of the RFP, that's where it could become problematic. It's not to say that the department, through all of the other efforts with this council, hearing from them what it is, what the services are that they need and things of that nature, would be the information the department would use to then work on the RFP. But it's sort of like it goes into a different process once that RFP starts. And so that's the concern that the department would have. So we would prefer not to even add in the word confer with them at this point.
So I guess the question I'll ask, currently, if you have an idea that, okay, we're going to develop a contract for this service, we need to do an RFP. How do those ideas originate? Would HHS have already discussed with the board, or would the board have had any discussion with them about we need this service, and that's was sort of the genesis for even thinking about creating the RFP?
I think the answer to that would be yes. And as far as how formalized it is, I'm not sure. You heard from Associate Commissioner Santinello in the previous session that there have been well over 200 stakeholder engagement opportunities as of late, given all that is going on with changes in the department. But the Quality Council meets regularly. There is a department staff that sits at those meetings. Other staff can come by invitation. So it's not that the department kind of sits in a silo and tries to come up with these RFPs. They engage stakeholders in voluminous meetings to get the ideas of what it is that we should do. So my answer to long and short, that would be yes, they would be, I don't think that there would be a request put out for services that say they were going to be new without there being any knowledge or information shared with not only the Quality Council, but the variety of other stakeholder groups that are engaged by the department on a regular basis.
So I guess I'll ask this of the committee here. I may be not reading this right, but if we were to move that language that you want to put in up into the next section, into three, would that satisfy what you're looking for? And in turn, it wouldn't put it in the RFP process, which would satisfy what you're looking for, I think.
I believe so, and I don't have a copy of the proposed amendment in front of me.
Well, even in the original bill, it's the same.
In the original bill, I think the on lines 27 to 29 of the proposal, that kind of I think is getting to what you're speaking to, Senator Pearl, with the significant changes. That would be a way to gather that information. So if it was felt that maybe something additional was necessary there, I'm not sure what the language would be, but if it was the council reviewing information on quality, then I don't think the department would have an issue. It's just if it's the requirement to confer with them when developing the RFP, that's where it becomes problematic.
Mm-hmm. So what about just pulling out line 34, taking out the confer and?
So receive input.
Just receive input. Because what we heard during testimony was that, of those 200 stakeholder group meetings, there was significant, we heard testimony that people had accessibility issues and attending and participating in meetings was a challenge. So yes, everything on 3 is kind of after the fact. It's a review. And we all accept the council was developed to be an advisory group, not an oversight commission, but to be able to use their advisory standing to tell the department, this is what we need. Because, 50% of the advisory the council are families who are going to be using these services.
Okay. Senator Carson has a
Yeah.
suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I think more work needs to be done on this, and perhaps a meeting between yourself and the Department of HHS, because I think you made a very good suggestion, but I think we just need to run it through. My concern is this is not an oversight commission.
Right.
And you're trying to give them oversight over a process that they should not be involved in.
No, not
whatsoever.
oversight.
It's just how can we improve the lines of communication between this entity and the department before they go out for an RFP process, so they can figure out a way that they can do that. And I'm not sure. I think Senator Jen Rowe's amendment is a good place to start. We shouldn't. It shouldn't be overcomplicated, and just maybe a meeting with you and the department. You guys can figure that out. And so I would just say, I don't know. Did we? Is there a motion on this? Was ought to pass?
Yes.
Can.
Yeah,
Okay,
we're in the amendment phase right now.
Okay, so can we just kind of walk it back?
Would the committee be agreeable to pulling this back and perhaps working a bit more on the
We
amendment?
would, and I think the spirit of what we're trying to do is understood, so.
Okay.
And I would say to your question, Senator Altschuler, the enabling legislation that is already out there does have a place for the committee to make, the Quality Council to make recommendations to the department for, all of the areas that they do get the information on. So, department certainly is not opposed if this committee would like us to work further, but I do think that mechanism might already be in the bill where they have the opportunity for all of those areas on page 2, section 3, lines 10 through now 29. They're responsible for making recommendations to the department for the improvement in the quality. So I think that could already be seen as if they felt that there were recommendations for service improvement, that could be a recommendation they could already provide to the department, and that could be utilized by the department in coming up with an RFP. So I think it might already be in there, even if we didn't look at any amendments to the statute as it sits today. They have that ability to make the recommendations to the department.
I'm sorry, can I,
Sure,
Mr. Chair,
absolutely.
where, I thought you were just talking about page 2. I'm looking at the original as amended by the House, right?
Yes.
So without the amendment, we were just talking about, did you just refer to lines 27 through 29?
No,
That would be new.
right. No, I'm sorry. What I was saying is if we look up at lines 10 through 12,
Through 12. Okay.
in Roman numeral 3, and then starting in line 11, it says that they regularly review the information and make recommendations for improving service quality and the quality assurance and continuous improvement. So what I was saying is that there's already the ability to, that's sort of their charge already, is to make recommendations to the department. And so if we're adding a category now down in lines 27 through 29, as you were talking about, for another area for them to review information and make recommendations, they already have that ability. So without adding anything about needing to confer or receive input with them relative to an RFP, they already have that authority, I believe, in the way that the current statute reads in their charge to make recommendations to the department.
Okay, but
Okay.
respectfully, I just want to make sure this point doesn't get lost, because this is important to me. Like, I think what you're saying is they have an ability to provide input or make recommendations, but that's different, right, than an actual contract for services. I mean, going out for something that's going to affect them day to day is very specific. And so I think just saying there are these general recommendations, shaping what's going to be provided to them, I think is the concern. And respectfully, I think we're here because it feels like that's not adequately being done. So we're trying to do this in a balance that, doesn't run afoul of anything you need to do, but some of what you just mentioned, it doesn't seem to address at least my concern fully.
Okay.
Okay. I just want to be like clear so we're talking the same way. Yep.
Yeah, no, I understand. And I just wanted to point out that there is already a mechanism. So if,
Yep.
to Senator Pearl and Carson's points, if there were an area that something was moved up into this Roman numeral 3 in what their responsibilities to provide recommendations are, maybe that strikes the balance.
Yeah. Understood. Okay.
Well, yeah,
So-
so we're walking back the,
Do we
We're
want
walking
to,
it back.
do we want to do something more now, or we want to take
No,
just take a breath on this right now and?
Yeah.
I
think
would,
about it.
I would prefer to take a breath
Okay.
and that, when work is done on this, that the council is party to that
So
work.
For those who
'Cause
made
it's about
motions, will
them.
you retract them? I'm not sure who did.
Yeah, who
I
made the
retract
motion?
whatever I made.
All right.
I retract any second.
Then we'll put this on hold until next time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Senator General, what time do you have to leave? I know you have a school group.
Well, 11:30 if they're here, but all I'm going to do is just welcome them.
Okay, I think we've only got one more bill here, if
Okay.
I'm not mistaken.
Is that the
Uh,
228?
228,
228.
and that is relative to the repealing Commission on Demographic Trends. I'm going to move ITL on this bill.
Second.
Yes, Senator.
I second.
Yeah.
My thoughts are that this was a bill that was brought over from the House, but there was no argument, no one from the House came and made an argument why this should be repealed, and the only testimony that we did receive was that it shouldn't be repealed, and so I didn't, I just wasn't convinced that this was the right time to do this.
It's also brand new, so let's see
Yeah.
what it
I
does.
know, I was gonna say, I was,
It's
you know,
only 10 months
I was
old.
in the chair, and
Right.
when we did this a few years ago, and we were told, like, we really need this information to inform us about housing, programs, you know, all these things. And now all of a sudden, they wanna get rid of it, and it's like, why? And I don't see a compelling reason to get rid of it, so.
I agree.
Further discussion? All those in favor of ITL? Aye. Any opposed? Consent?
I move consent.
Moved and seconded by Senator Gendro. All in favor?
Aye.
Who'd like to take this out?
I'll take it out.
Senator Gendro.
We don't have anything else?
That's all I have. Anything else that anyone else would like to bring forward, I believe, unless I've missed something in my notes.
Oh, I see. You don't want to do anything on 409?
No, 409 I want to hold, and
Yeah, and on 421, I have a meeting this
Yes.
afternoon at 1
Okay.
o'clock.
Okay.
Along with, Senator Whitley's gonna be there, because
Good.
we had her bill that we sent over to the House, so.
And just for your input, Senator Carson, I've heard there's a possibility that will get tabled. And so we may want to consider how we can,
Hold back.
yeah,
Yeah.
amend,
And
maybe
amend
insert
this.
our Senate language into 421 as a replace all amendment.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay.
It's the time for fun and games.
so
So, just putting that on your radar.
I'll bring up 454 real quick. You know what, I did not have any notes on what I wanted to do with that. I actually had a question mark on it, so.
Okay.
Anything that, any input that you folks have on this? I know one concern that I had notes on was that non-public information couldn't be made public by the public transparency advocate.
I just, again, it's one of those kind of a messy things. I think we just need a little time.
Okay,
In fact, these are due, I think, in June 1st.
yeah, we have a little
So we
time on
got
this,
some
it's not an
time.
FN.
Yeah.
I just wanted to throw it out there if anybody had thoughts on it for now. I'm fine with holding it.
She's the gal
I
that
had an ITL
testified
thought,
is,
but, you know,
from my
But,
district.
you know,
Mhm.
It doesn't, Jensen,
Yeah.
I think it's looking to just stir a pot that doesn't need stirring, like why? Like literally no
Well,
one
I
asked
had
for
a
this.
question mark on it because I wasn't sure the best path forward for it, so why don't we sit on it for a
Yeah.
bit then, and we can have some time to think about it.
But literally no one asked for it.
Just
so.
a quick question, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
After today, how many bills left need to be heard?
Three,
Three?
which is
Okay.
next Wednesday.
That's not bad. We're pretty good.
And
The
so
last three are next, or
next
that's
Wednesday.
it?
So
And then we're just exacting.
I would encourage anyone who's able to have amendments for bills we could exec next Wednesday, that we could do that. I'd like to wrap up a lot of our responsibilities. I realize there may be a
Next
couple
week.
of these next, And again, it's maybe for personal reasons, because finance is picking up and I'm extremely busy. But anything we could get exec next week, I'd really, if we can have consensus on it, I'd really like to do that.
Okay.
So I would encourage everyone to maybe work toward that goal if they're able to.
Okay, sounds good.
Okey-doke.
Anything further before we move out of exec?
One last comment, if anyone has feedback on the 655 amendment I prepared, I would love that, so that it can
Okay.
be ready
We'll
next
we'll
week
be
to
working
discuss.
on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All
I'm-
right.
I'm not certain I'll be ready to move forward next week. I'm holding back on that for the pure reason of I want to see what happens in House Bill 2 as we move into it with finance. There's some OPLC things in there that we may want to put in the same amendment. So I'm not going to be anxious to move that until I absolutely have to, okay? Just for that reason. But we certainly can talk about changes you want to have, since it's going to be a bit of an encompassing document.
Yeah, we might as
No problem
well
in doing that.
just provide the opportunity for the public to understand what we're trying to do too. so.
Any pieces that we can get consensus on before we get to the end will make it easier.
Sure.
Okey-doke.
Motion to move out of exec?
So moved.
Second? Do we have a second? Second? She seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? We're out of exec session. And without work being completed for the day, we're going to adjourn.